always knew I wanted more than one kid. Always assumed I would have more than one kid. But now we don't know what that'll look like. And so it's also reconciling for me in my brain what I thought my family unit was going to look like and the potential that my family unit may not. Not that it couldn't, but there's the potential, the newest potential that it may just not look the way you thought it was going to look, baby. You'll have to deal with that.
Yeah, I just have so many current thoughts and feelings that I'm kind of processing about where we are right now. And we are basically now at the point that we're pretty sure, if we want to have a second baby, we need to do IVF. Mm-hmm. We're kind of like literally at this now or never point. Like we're either going to do this seriously, like in the next few weeks, like we pull the trigger, or we just accept the fact that, like you were saying, it's just going to look different for us. And we just need to embrace the family that we do have. Hi, I'm Peavy.
Hi, I'm Jamie, and welcome to Blank is a Mother podcast.
We are two toddler boy moms that have been best friends since college, and we are here to share our unique motherhood journeys through a comparative lens.
And we all say we're not supposed to compare, right? But clearly we know that's not realistic.
Because the first few years of motherhood shook our lives and friendship like no other experience has.
And by comparing and contrasting our journeys, we've discovered the strongest threads of sisterhood yet.
We don't have all the answers, and we sure have made some missteps.
So we invite you to follow along as we do our best to nurture our friendship while making 1,000 tiny mama decisions in an unfair world.
Hi, I'm Peavy.
Hi, I'm Jamie, and welcome to Blank is a Mother podcast.
Today, we are going to be talking about baby number 2, is a mother. Fully loaded topic.
Yeah. I mean, you think about baby number 2, I think it'd be interesting to go back to what our visions of our quote unquote families looked like in our brains years ago before we even had a family. So like, do you want to start, Peeve? In your mind, what did you think your family unit would look like in terms of the number of children?
When I was growing up, when I was like a kid, I wasn't convinced actually that I wanted a family because especially when I got to high school, I think I was very much like, I don't want to get married. I don't want to have kids not because I didn't think I would be a good mom or I would enjoy having kids. I just thought I was from a broken home. Sounds so dire. And I didn't have a whole lot of faith in like the whole marriage thing and the whole like having a happy, healthy family. I just didn't necessarily have that perspective when I was younger. And I'm sure I was jaded and full of resentment and all that stuff, like grief that I hadn't processed with my parents breaking up and my dad going the way he did, which is, he just kind of separated himself. He wasn't a part of our lives really. So that was like probably how I went into college thinking like, oh, it's just, just me. I don't need to have a family. I don't need to have kids kind of thing. Also, I was super into still am, but very into environmental issues and very much aware of overpopulation and food shortages and all the things. So I think I was like, I'm just not going to have kids. I'm not going to get married. Not that I was against like having relationships. Obviously, I had really strong and long-term relationships, but I just didn't think I would get married or have a kid. And at some point I thought, maybe I'll adopt or something. I don't know. I had all kinds of crazy ideas that were coming in and out. But then it was really not when my sister got married. So my sister's 3.5 years older than me. Mm-hmm. And she ended up marrying her college sweetheart, who's amazing. But so they got married pretty quick after they graduated college. So it wasn't really when they got married that I started to change my mind, but it was when they had kids, when they had Bella, my oldest niece, who just started college. Crazy to think she's that old. Yeah, when they had Bella, like my whole world changed.
Aw, yeah.
I just wrote this to her in her graduation card that her being born changed me, changed all of us. And just seeing like the joy that she brought to every single person around her. I mean, she's like a total spark, you know, she's a force and has been since she was born. So anyway, just her coming into our lives really changed my perspective. And then when they had Sophie, my youngest niece, just a few years later, it was like very coming on strong, the maternal instinct with me. And I was like, okay, I want this, you know, this is like what it's all about. I was very aware, like I wanted to make sure I was with the right person. And we've talked about that in other conversations. Like I didn't want to just have a baby to have a baby. And I knew I was kind of going down the path where it might be later in life for me. Also, I have endometriosis and I've had that since I was a kid. And so there was just some like feeling that I've had, this intuition since I was really young that I would have a really hard time having a baby, like conceiving naturally. Fast forward when Brett and I got married and I was trying to have him get me pregnant before we were even married because, you know, he was resistant at first. I was really nervous because I was 38 at that time after we got married and started trying in almost in earnest. I was like, yeah, here we go. Like, we're going to see how long it takes if it's even going to happen naturally. I feel very lucky. It's the only time in my whole life that I've ever felt like I was pregnant and have been pregnant. Once we had Everett, we were very, very happy, very excited, overjoyed. But we were like, ooh, this is fucking hard. This is really hard. And we were just trying to envision, like, how are we going to do all the things that we have loved to do up to this point? Travel, for one. Everything is harder with kids. So I think for the first year of Everett's life, we were very much like, one and done. That's it. That's all we need. Just this one kid is going to make us so happy and fill out our home and our family, and we'll be good to go. And he's going to keep us busy. And it wasn't until a little bit before, like I had some career issues, hurdles, hiccups with going back to work. So that whole like transition period for me kind of was reorganizing my priorities. And then the pandemic hit. That was a huge wake up call for, I think, everybody on like where their priorities stood. And so both Brett and I kind of had this awakening where we're like, no, we do want a second baby. We want Everett to have a sibling. So that's my thought process. I went from like really, really unsure to, yes, I want a family, but I know I need to wait, to, oh, one is good. And then shortly after that saying, no, we really want a second. A little bit of a roller coaster.
And see, and I had I don't want to say the opposite, but so going back, it's, you know, my brother and me, James and Jamie. Yeah, we're not that creative with the names. We're 4 years apart. I'm the baby. I always knew that I wanted to have kids, and I always knew that I wanted to get married, and I always knew that I wanted to marry somebody like my dad, because my dad is the sweetest person on the planet. So all of those were known. I also thought that I would have kids later in life because I was so career focused. I didn't think it was going to be this late, but I knew that it would probably be later for me. Similarly to you and Brett, John and I started trying to start our family before our wedding too. I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. I know y'all are still a little bit traditional in that regard, but.
Well, I wanted him to, but he wouldn't.
Oh, okay.
That's the difference. John was game. Brett was like, no.
And see, John is, he's 8 years older. So both of us are probably like, look, we might as well just start trying because we don't know how long it will take us. And thankfully, we did try before we got married, with enough time that if we did get pregnant, we thought we'd be able to do like the we'll hide it type of thing. But that doesn't matter because it didn't happen. And then we ended up going through IVF, which we talk about in other conversations. But I say all that to say I always knew that I wanted kids. And I always knew, or thought, I should say, that I wanted 2 kids. Not more than 2, 2. Like specifically 2, because I was trying to emulate the family life that I had. Like, okay, well, it's James and me. So, of course, if I have a kid, I want 2 kids. John, because he's one of 4, said that he always wanted like 3 or 4 kids. And I was like, okay, well.
Oh, dang.
You should have got a younger chick, baby, because I'm going to see what I can do. I got you that first little one. I'm going to see what we can do with number 2. But if you wanted more than that, you should have checked the stats before you committed. So all that to say that we are still, having conversations about baby number 2, which I know we're getting into that next. But our journey is just not potentially, our journey is going to look a little differently today than we anticipated what it would look like going into baby number 2, even as recently as like a couple months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Always knew I wanted more than one kid. Always assumed I would have more than one kid. But now we don't know what that'll look like. And so it's also reconciling for me in my brain what I thought my family unit was going to look like and the potential that my family unit may not. Not that it couldn't, but there's the potential, the newest potential that it may just not look the way you thought it was going to look, baby. You'll have to deal with that.
Let's just jump into that because that's kind of where we are now, where you and I have been, because our lives are so parallel.
Absolutely. 100%.
Where we have been in the past 2 years, I would say, like a solid 2 years, both of us really thinking a lot about baby number 2, and you knowing that you're going to do IVF because you did IVF the first time. And that's, what you knew in your head, like you and John committed to it. We're doing IVF for baby number 2. And it was really just the timing of when are we going to start? The process, how much time it takes, how much emotional and physical energy it takes. So you wanted to, I'm putting words in your mouth now, but you wanted to be present with
my
LJ
story.
for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
Before, and like live a little, get your business up and running before you started your IVF journey.
Yeah, it was timing, strictly timing for us.
Yeah. You were like, okay, we're going to do IVF, but it's just when. Whereas I've said this before, like it doesn't matter if you weigh 400 pounds and you eat cheeseburgers every lunchtime, from McDonald's or whatever. Your ovaries don't necessarily care. Like you're either fertile or you're not. I'm definitely exaggerating. There are things you can do to increase, your overall health and
we got
ovarian reserve and all that stuff. But more or less, like you're either going to be fertile when you're 42 or not. And it's just like how many eggs you got left in the vault. So even when we decided, when Everett was like a year and a half, yes, we're going to start trying for number 2, Brett just thought, okay, we'll just, do this naturally. And I was very much feeling nervous about even trying to conceive naturally the second time, despite that it went so well the first time. Because after I had Everett, and I know I've complained about this to you a lot, my whole body changed, like full stop changed. I feel like a completely different person, like physically, from before I had Everett. I was so in tune with my body before I had Everett because I mentioned I had endometriosis my whole life. And my whole being revolved around this like pain cycle that I had and like all these symptoms that I had with my period. And that actually, I didn't realize it throughout all those years, but it was giving me so much information every month. This was information, good, bad, or ugly. And after I had Everett, the only way I know how to describe it is that I've become like this flat line where I don't know if it's hormonal imbalance or low hormones or perimenopause or whatever it is. I am like a flat line. I don't have the symptoms I had before. I just don't have that information that I used to get every month with my cycle. And it makes me feel really clueless. Like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know when I'm ovulating. I mean, long story short, for the past 3 years, we've been peeing on sticks and tracking ovulation and doing all the things. And I think finally coming up on the 3-year mark of trying naturally, Brett is really accepting the fact that it's very, very, very rare that it would happen naturally. And I'm 43 years old, going to be 44 in the spring. And yeah, I just have so many current thoughts and feelings that I'm kind of processing about where we are right now. And we are basically now at the point that you and John have been at for the last couple of years where we're pretty sure, if we want to have a second baby, we need to do IVF. Mm-hmm. And that is an uphill battle for us for a number of reasons. And I can share those. But yeah, we're kind of like literally at this now or never point. Like we're either going to do this seriously, like in the next few weeks, like we pull the trigger, pun intended. Or we just accept the fact that, like you were saying, it's just going to look different for us. And we just need to embrace the family that we do have, let go these last few years of really wanting to have a second baby and just lean into what we do have. And yeah, but you have had a whole different roadblock.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So things have changed. Some decisions have started making themselves for me. So I'll go back a little bit. So John and I won't speak for John because I don't know what was going in through his little coconut head. In my coconut head, I kind of thought once LJ's like 1.5, we'll just do IVF and it'll be easy. Like, well, not easy, but we'll just do IVF and have another successful, cycle. And then we can figure out when we want to transfer the embryo. Like, that's in my brain. So I want to say it was 2022 or 2021. Now all the years blend. Post COVID, I don't know what year it is. So I'd say about a year and some change after COVID. So LJ was about 1. We went through another cycle of IVF. We went through all of that, the shots, the trigger shot, the retrieval, the creation of embryos, and we didn't have any viable embryos. And this is the crazy thing that comes into focus. That reminds me that I probably really wasn't ready for another baby then. Because when the doctor called to say, I'm so sorry, you went through that cycle, we don't have any embryos, my emotional quote unquote reaction was, oh, okay. And now I can look at that and say, I was like, we probably weren't ready. Mentally, I probably wasn't ready. So there's the contrast of mentally, if you're ready, but you also know that physically you need to move because my body is getting older, right? So mentally, I was like, I wasn't there yet. I can acknowledge that now. Physically, though, I'm like, we have to do another cycle now because, I'm getting older and there's pressure. And I have this BRCA2 genetic mutation, and I need to make sure that we have another baby so then I can make health-related decisions around a prophylactic double mastectomy and an oophorectomy to remove my ovaries. So I have like medical decisions that were waiting to be made depending on what the next baby number 2 situation looked like.
Can you pause for 1 second and just say what the BRCA2 gene is and when you found out and everything?
Oh, yes.
You found out early.
I did. So the BRCA2, the acronym is, it's BRCA, and the acronym stands for breast cancer. So the BR for breast, CA for cancer. And there is the BRCA1 genetic mutation, and there is the BRCA2 genetic mutation. Both make you more susceptible to ovarian and breast cancer. And now we know in today's day and age that it's associated with a host of other cancers as well, which I'll happy to just give Cliff's notes on. But because my mom is a 3-time breast cancer survivor and she's amazing, her medical team at Johns Hopkins suggested strongly after her second battle or journey, as I call it, that I get genetically tested for the BRCA2 and then actually that she get tested because at that time we didn't know anything about the BRCA2. So my mom got genetically tested. She was BRCA2 positive, and BRCA2 makes you more susceptible to breast cancer than ovarian. You both have elevated risks for both cancers, but the difference between the BRCA1 and the BRCA2 is which of those 2 cancers you have the highest percentage of getting. BRCA1 and BRCA2 diagnoses, I have to say, does not mean that you will get cancer. It just means that you have a very high probability of getting one of the 2. Prayerfully, not both. So for my mom and I, we are BRCA2 positive, which means that our chances of getting breast cancer are higher than ovarian. My mom tested positive for the BRCA2, and then I tested for the BRCA2 in like my late 20s. So since then up until now, I have been like, all right, this is my genetic makeup, and I've been very proactive with my healthcare. So when I moved to Florida in 2013, one of the first things that I did was become a patient of the Florida cancer specialists, because when you have the BRCA gene, but you have not yet had cancer, you are called a previvor. So you are surviving the diagnosis. You're a previvor. So as a previvor, I signed on with the Florida Cancer Specialist Group. And that means that instead of me just going for my annual mammogram, I do a mammogram, and then in 6 months, I get an ultrasound. So I never go a full year without someone laying eyes and hands on my breastises. Make sure that everything is good.
Someone's got to be touching them.
Somebody, yeah, girl, because otherwise, Lord. That's about the only person I have touching them because my libido is gone. But we'll talk about that in another episode. But I do let the doctors touch my breastises. And so that has been my saving grace, that every 6 months I go and I make sure that something is being done to watch me for that. So you take my medical history and my medical diagnosis, if you will, of having BRCA2, and some doctors, not all, kind of applying pressure to get your breasts removed and to remove your ovaries. So you have that pressure in your mind starting in your late 20s. And now we have baby number 1, and he's beautiful and he's healthy and he's happy and he's funny. And now we're like, well, we want baby number 2, but we need to rush. We felt this since we need to hurry up. Of course, for my eggs, like you said, Peeve, the longer we wait, the more them little jokers are dwindling. And I know that I'm against the clock in terms of, my BRCA genetic mutation. So we went through that last round a couple years ago. Nothing happened. But in my mind, I'm like, all right, we'll just do it again. So John and I, and this, Peeve, have been having conversations about when we are actually going to be intentional about scheduling another IVF cycle. And with IVF, you have to do it in a month where you know that you're not going to travel. Because once your eggs and your follicles start growing, it's every day for blood work until you get the call yep, it's time. And then I think it's within 48 hours or whatever, you get your trigger shot, your pun, and then your eggs release, you get embryos, you get your eggs fertilized, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Since January of this year, John and I have kept saying, next month. We'll do it next month. We kept pushing it out because life is life, and we have a toddler. John and I both have our own businesses, so we I always say procrastination is rooted in the false sense that you have time. Because when we procrastinate, we always just assume we'll do it tomorrow. And that the assumption is that tomorrow is coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we kept procrastinating. We pushed it out. And now, given what, I'm going to share next, there was a larger picture that I just didn't know was in front of me. So I was procrastinating because I was building my brand, and I was like, I don't have time to sit still for a month, but maybe September-ish, let's see, we'll keep pushing it out. Well, in April or May, I did a mammogram. In June-ish, I did the ultrasound. I did the breast ultrasound in June or early July, I want to say. And then they said, we're not super concerned, but because of your genetic history, and we, just want to, there's something that we're not too concerned about. Don't worry about it. But we want to do a biopsy in both breasts at the end of the month. And I'm like, okay. That was July 25th. July 26th, while I'm so laid up in the bed icing my boobs, I get the call that there is cancer in my right breast. And it's the news that is always a possibility, but you still, even knowing that there's that large probability and possibility, you still aren't ready for that call. So my practical brain, as of today, and now we're in the, almost the end of August, is still processing. And I still haven't felt all of the emotions I think that I will feel as my surgery approaches, which is September 27th. And in my processing, I'm also realizing that this cancer diagnosis and what I'm about to go through to heal my body and to get these toxins out and all the trauma that's going to be, a part of this. Now, baby number 2 is not an option right now. Now, treating my body is the priority. So it changes your perspective. And so now it's okay, well, do we still want to even try for baby number 2 after I have my double mastectomy and I'm healing? Yes. And I say yes with a question mark in my voice because John is absolutely. We get you healed up and we go. He's like, we will be fine. And yeah, we will still go for baby number 2. He didn't even bat an eye. He was like, you got this, we got this. And yeah, and then we'll just do it afterwards. My mind is, I definitely still would love to have a sibling for LJ. I just don't know how my body is going to feel I don't know emotionally how I'm going to feel. So I cannot make an informed decision right now until I have gone through even the mourning of my body as I know it, and that's a whole process. People use the toxic positivity when they mean well and they're trying to encourage you, but they use words like, oh, they're just boobs. Like you can get new boobs. It's fine. It's not an arm. It's not a leg. It's not the end of the world. You'll be fine. And I'm realizing that they're just, I don't want to say they're just boobs. They're still a part of your body. They're still a part of your femininity. They're still a part of your sexuality. For me, I can't speak for anybody else, but it's still a part of your body that you are going to have removed. Like that's still trauma to your body. And then thinking of baby number 2. And again, this is me talking. I'm not speaking for every woman that has had a double mastectomy. It's my experience that I'm sharing, is that knowing that if we have another baby, I won't be able to breastfeed. So, and that's another component of, my motherhood journey with LJ was that even though it was tough and I was only, and I shouldn't say only, I was able to successfully breastfeed for 6 months. I have to correct that because a lot of the times we put pressure on ourselves on how long we should breastfeed, and everybody doesn't have to breastfeed. In my journey, it's that I enjoyed the connection with LJ. And so if we had baby number 2, it's also a mental game with me with saying, well, then I'm not going to be able to breastfeed baby number 2. So all of that to say, there is a lot at play now. My vision of my family has to have to be fluid in my thought of what that's going to look like, given that I thought I had time to make a decision about my family and then make decisions around my medical makeup. My medical makeup made the decision for me. You have a cancer diagnosis now that you need to treat. And then baby number 2 will be an afterthought. Every month, we're losing more eggs. Every month, we're less fertile. Even going through IVF is not a guarantee. Going through IVF is putting more hormones into your body. Already as a BRCA2 person, that's another risk. So my game has changed a little bit. The players on the court have changed a little bit.
I mean, you have a different coach,
I do. I do.
Everything changed.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And I had not even thought about this piece before you just sharing that right here now. I am so glad that you did procrastinate, January, February, March, April. Because can you imagine? I actually know people who have been diagnosed while they were pregnant.
While they're pregnant. I do
it
too.
It is not a good situation.
Not at all. My breast surgeon said that to me. We had this conversation. He had a patient that kept waiting and waiting, and then finally they got pregnant. And I think this patient was maybe in her second trimester and was diagnosed. And they had to figure out how to treat her with chemo and everything else while she was pregnant. So there was a bigger picture. I had a very myopic view. It was baby and then medical, baby and then medical. No, there was a reason, unbeknownst to me, why there was that procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
There was silver lining in this. And for me, one of the biggest silver linings is that my mom, and I love this, something that you said to me, PV, that I shared with my mom. My mom has been feeling guilty that she passed this genetic mutation to me. And she's like, I gave this to you and you're going through this because of me. And remember, we were having this conversation, you and I were, and you said, maybe you can frame the narrative a little differently for your mom and to let her know that she actually saved your life by going through what she did. Because had I not known about my genetic mutation, I would have gone for an annual mammogram only like everybody else. And my genetic makeup made me a candidate for having every 6 months. Because if I'd waited another full year since that mammogram, that cancer would have spread throughout my body.
And for being aggressive with doing that biopsy, even though they were like, oh, it's probably fine.
Yeah.
It really is. She gave you a gift and she went through a lot to give you that gift.
Yeah, that has been the silver lining of this, is that it was caught early and that my medical team is amazing because they stay on top of me. And I have to give myself a pat on the back for staying on top of it as well and not just skipping appointments, because that's easy to do too and say I'll go next year. So God is good. Kali said this, that to tell your testimony, you need a test. And so this is just a test so that you can then keep sharing your testimony and your story with the rest of the world. It's just going to be a little different.
Good one, Collie. You are amazing for how, I mean, I know in your head, in your heart, you knew that you were going to do this anyway. You were going to have your double mastectomy anyway. It was just, again, a matter of time. But that decision for the timing was taken away from you. The decision was made for you with this diagnosis, as was the decision to do IVF in September, like you guys had planned most recently. And probably so many more little pieces and decisions that probably don't feel like your own. And so there's also just a lot of grief, I feel like, that you're going to experience, even though I know because you are practical and proactive, you have a surgery date that's a month from now. And you're like, okay, now I have like these next steps that I can do. And you can just focus on those steps. But at some point between now and then, or while you're just laying in that bed for the 7 to 10 days after your surgery, when you are really feeling it physically and emotionally, I feel like that grief is going to really bubble up. So here I go. No, I'm going to cry.
I did so well. Don't you do it.
I know. It's okay. I warned Jamie before this episode that I have like all these raw emotions right now. So they're just going to come out.
It's okay.
But I did this whole like somatic healing thing this morning. And one thing that the instructor said, like, you can't feel better without feeling. So I think that I know you and your nature, that you stay positive and you stay focused on the objectives, and and I fully, wholeheartedly believe that you're going to be okay. LJ's going to be okay. John's going to be okay. Everybody's going to be okay. But it's still a lot, and it still sucks. Like, it makes me sad that you didn't get to choose, when you were going to have baby number 2. And what also came up for me as you were sharing, carrying your baby is not the only way to have a baby. There's other options. And again, you don't need to think about this right now, but down the road, when you guys are ready to think about it, surrogacy is totally an option where you could still have your egg and John's sperm. It's still your baby, but someone else carries it. So the physical burden of carrying the baby isn't on you and your recovered body. And I appreciate John's confidence in your strength, and I have that confidence in you too. But you don't even have to put your body through that if you don't want to. Like, even if you think you can, you're going to be 44, 45. Maybe you don't want to,
Yeah. And I love that John is like, yeah, we'll do it. And I also know that if it turns out that we don't, that he'll be just as fine as well. So yeah, I got through all that. And then here you go, starting.
I know. And I'm such an ugly crier too. I can't even.
Oh, girl. Now you should see the bottom lip. My bottom lip was moving. Good thing this microphone's in front of it. No, I hear you. I do. And I know that there are other options. And so we just have to get through this first leg of our relay and see what happens. And yeah, there's so many pieces. And thank you for feeling with me. Of course, you have your own feelings, but with me that, I didn't get to choose. And again, it's because when I was talking about doing a prophylactic double mastectomy, it was still a choice. And so even if I decided down the road not to, I didn't have to. That's not an option. So even more so now at 42 with a breast cancer diagnosis, more of a push in my mind to let's go ahead and get the ovaries out. But that impacts baby number 2 also, so many things at play. And I agree, Peeve. I think that the emotional piece is really going to kick my ass come either right before surgery or at surgery time, because I'm still in practical mode. You know how my brain works, like you said. But I am a cuddler. And I think that's going to be a struggle because LJ is my cuddle bug. And I'm not going to be able to pick him up. He's not going to be able to sleep in the bed because, I'm fearful of my drains. And so even trying to parent him through this process is going to be something that I didn't think that I would have to consider right now, because in my mind, again, I had time to do a mastectomy. Maybe that timing would have been when LJ's a little bit older and he's not as mommy, mommy, mommy. So that adds a different dynamic to parenting as a mommy and again, I'm not the only woman that's gone through this. And I hope that we as women that have gone through this, especially with the toddlers, can just celebrate each other and to be thankful for our support systems.
Mm-hmm. Prepping LJ is going to be key, which I know you guys probably have already started, or at least have started talking about how you will prep him. But there are other ways that toddlers can feel connected to their mamas. And if you want Everett to usher LJ into the world of foot massages, please, you can send an instructional video on all the ways that you can fawn after these women by massaging their feet. Oh my God, that's a whole thing.
That is hilarious. Have you seen my feet?
Hey, they don't care. Let me tell you, they do not care. At least Everett doesn't care. It doesn't have to be feet, but I'm just saying, like, you could find, because you could explain to him, like, you know, this is going to be hard for me. It's going to be hard for you. It's just temporary. It's going to feel long when we're in it, but we're going to get through it. And here's all the other things we'll get to do that are new and special during that time.
I love that.
You know, you'll find all the little things that will work for you guys.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Beef.
Mm-hmm.
All things considered, I know we will be fine. It's just allowing myself to feel the emotion when it comes. And I've been working on that even with my therapist. She asked me the other day, what does vulnerability mean to you? Like, what synonyms come to mind? Or what comes to mind when you think of vulnerability? And I said, weak.
I knew you were going to say that.
You knew it. Sadness, crying. And as they were coming out of my mouth, I'm like, that's not at all what vulnerability is. But for some reason, that's what how my brain processes, which is probably why I struggle with being vulnerable, because I don't want to be seen as weak. And that's not what it is. In essence, John and I were talking about this. He's like, showing vulnerability makes you strong because it shows that you are comfortable showing all facets of who you are and how you're feeling. So I think that's part of this process for me too, is being vulnerable, not thinking that it's a weakness because it's not thinking that it's all about sadness because it's not, and rewriting the narrative in my brain of what vulnerable means so that I can actually exercise the art of being vulnerable, which includes letting your circle pour into you and not feeling guilty about letting people help you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm learning. I'm picking up some things.
But I think also vulnerability is letting things in so that you can let them out. If you never let them surface or come into your sphere, they're going to be somewhere and they're just going to fester. And then they're going to come out at the worst times.
Absolutely.
You know, when you really don't want them to. Or they're going to just like seep into all these other parts of your being and your life that you are like, oh, why are you showing up here? Why are you showing up there? So I feel like you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable and surrender to all of those things to be able to take them in, like give them the space they need, whatever it is, anger, resentment, you know, even some selfishness, like things that you aren't necessarily proud of. And then part of it, I think, can be changing the narrative, because a lot of that is just our own interpretations of them. And actually, it's not usually, most times, it's actually not the negativity that we're associating with them. That's the truth. It's just our own narratives that are actually untrue that we're hanging on to inside, but allowing us to open and like be vulnerable to just process that. And like you said, lean on the different support networks you have, including your therapist, to have that like reflection where she's saying like vulnerability isn't those things. That's your narrative that you've been hanging on to for yourself. And so how do you rewrite that narrative to make it those strengths, or to like get rid of the things that you no longer need to hold?
Absolutely. And so I'm working on that. It's not easy for me to just be like, yeah, someone, can we help? Like, yeah, oh no, I'm good. I got it. Don't worry about it. I'm
Mm.
good. I'll let you know. Oh, that's mine. I will let you know. Thank you. Because that allows me to procrastinate or push it off. So,
Mm-hmm.
nope. I am honoring all of that. Well, we'll keep everybody informed and updated on what this baby number 2 journey looks like for both of us.
Yeah. And I love, maybe I'm weird in this way. I love hearing other people's stories. Like I love, I know there are so many moms out there that have been in our shoes in one way or another, or are now or will be. So please, if you're listening and you feel compelled to be vulnerable and to share your story, I would love to hear, what your decision points were and how your story ended up or is going now, and good, bad, or ugly. I'm on a few Facebook groups. I probably should mute now and then, but I hear a lot of stories that way too. But this community, I'm obviously very invested in, and I want to hear from our community what their stories are around baby number 2.
Absolutely. And as you're telling us your stories, please include any resources that you used to help you come to your decisions as well, so that we can share that out with the larger community, because a large part of this podcast is having open and authentic conversations, but also providing resources to our listeners as well, as we all navigate this crazy mama world together. So if you have any of those resources that you'd like to share, please do, and we can share with our larger community.
Thank you for being vulnerable, Jay, and sharing everything that you shared today.
Oh, thank you, Peeve. Because I don't. Like, certain things I'm like, I don't know about how deep. But you know what? The blessing of doing this with you. I mean, I've been vulnerable with you before, so if I just have, it's talking to you. So thank you for continuing to create a safe space for me to feel like I can be vulnerable and open, and I recognize I can be more vulnerable and more open more often. So I'm working on that too, and hopefully, we'll get there. But thank you for being that person for me.
I love you. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for being a part of our inner circle. And I hope you're finding us on Instagram _is-a-mother-podcast, and follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. We are there, and we'd love to, like we said, hear your own stories, your own resources for sharing. Please follow us so you can get tipped off to when we have new episodes that are coming out, but also provide a rating too, because I think ratings are such a great way. I know I use them all the time. Great way for other people to come across the podcast that would resonate with them and provide that community and those resources for them that support. So
that's right. And share it with your friends.
Yes. Share with your friends, with your girlfriends. And don't forget, go call your best friend.
Call your best friend, man. We love y'all. Thank you for joining us for another episode. And we'll see you next go round. Bye, Peeve. Love you.
Bye. Love you too. Thank you so much for listening and being part of our conversation and our inner circle.
Follow us on Instagram _is-a-mother-podcast. And we look forward to you and your best friends joining us next episode.
Leave a rating on this podcast app. It really helps us get our conversations to more friends out there, more friendship circles, and more women and more mothers. And that's what we're here for, to broaden the conversation, to bring everybody into the circle.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
Go call your best friend.